CGRs, galactic cosmic rays, that pulse comes in. Where will the earthquakes be since they can be predicted? Let me give you an example of earthquakes without looking at those. The pulse inputs. On my screen, there are 4 alarms, right? 4 alarms right now. There are 4 alarms. Normally, it's about a 2 to 3 days. They start happening. So there are 4 alarms. Nobody else is going to have four. Nobody else has these. They're just not going to publicize these indications, right? There are 4. Let me pull up the aerial view here, guys. I'm going to do a map overlay real quick. With these 4 alarms, these are 4, which means if you have the alarms and they're yellow alarms, that means these are higher than 4.5. They're 5 to 7. Each one is about a 5 to 7. These 4 are 5 to 7. Now that will likely change as we get closer. 5 to 7. And while this slow map is pulling up, now it's going over a lot of data as it does this. This is like pixel by pixel. It's rendering a map for me. Anyway, these 4 alarms, the reason they're there is because of quite a few. You're looking at a formula that's long, and it's inclusive with a lot of data. For example, all the vibrations in the earth for the past week, right, they're gone through. All their values are mapped out. They go through about 4 or 5 iterations with a quadratic equation applied to them. Then you add in the other data points. You have other formulas that are applied which render this map, and they give a pretty good indication of where trouble spots are as far as earthquakes. It goes through scenarios, of course, modeling, which has fluid dynamics built into it. So with all those calculations being constantly input into this system, into this alarm system, it gives you a pretty good outcome on things, which is why when you guys hear an alarm, right? I know I don't talk about them, but when you hear an alarm, there's always an earthquake the day following or something like that, right? If you hear one of those big alarms, normally it happens within 8 hours. That's what normally happens. And, sometimes you guys have heard a couple of the alarms. A couple of them when they went off, and then I just kind of cut them off, but sure enough, the earthquakes followed. So can they be predicted? It's hard to give. I just told you the answer, but it's very difficult to give you that flat out yes or no, because who's going to corroborate that? Who's going to do it? And it's not, I'm not using anybody else's equipment for a long time, since the 90s. And because a time, I tell you guys again, a time is coming that a lot of things are going to be brought to bear. A lot of things are going to be needed, right? They're going to be needed. They're really going to be needed. Some of our some of our power centers, they know there's a problem with the nuclear facilities and power generation. They know the risk just went up big time. The risk increased about 500% of a breakdown in nuclear facilities in the last 3 days. You already know why, right? So I normally keep these things, and these are day-to-day plots for me, right? Day-to-day plots. So I kind of keep track of these things because people are not going to do it. What's happened to a lot of folks is they are driven by what people want to know, right? I'm not driven by what people want to know. I'm driven by what's going to actually help somebody. That drives me every single day to actually help. I'm not concerned about popularity. I'm concerned about a person making it through certain things, right? Helping, actual help. I get upset when I can't help anybody. So I normally develop things that actually help. Like there's a medical program, but I just recently redid. That'll help some of our singers out tremendously. Once that's approved, it goes out, and they'll be helped out tremendously. Things like that, which, by the way, I'll make available on the site here soon enough. I'm waiting until I'm waiting for something to come back, so I'm good to go. Listen, unfortunately, here's how it works. Because when you're educated or you have information from the government side, they have to separate the two. You can't build something with your knowledge and it not be clear through certain channels, because they could easily say, well, that's, you got that from us, so technically that's not yours, and you just broke, this law or that law and things like that. So I have to watch out for those things, right? I have to stay within my territory. So it just makes things a little harder on me, but not undoable. There are 6 alarms. I'm sorry, I'm underestimated. There are 6 alarms. I didn't see the one down in the corner. So it looks like I'm going to give you a description of this. I'm not going to pinpoint any one place, but I'm going to give you a description of this. It looks like there's a Russian issue. Number 1, that is the number 2 alarm is in Russia, actually. It is derived in that plate in Russia. India is also, it has a bit of a problem. Sri Lanka, they normally don't really, hopefully nothing happens there, but it looks like somewhere in that vicinity we're going to have some more quakings. Now, the rocking and rolling is going to break loose. Australia, something will likely hit near Australia. This area, Singapore, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, Australia, all those places in this province. We've had activity in Cuba, Dominican Republic, and all those places, but this time it looks like there's an instability right above Australia. So I expect something near that vicinity, near that area in Australia. And Italy. Italy may have a couple that are these are finicky, and that's due to volcanic activity. Because the magma charts are showing they have a buildup in certain places in Italy. Now, ironically, before I began this project, Italy has always been on my mind, because for some reason, I get the feeling that place is going to just burn up. The whole thing is just going to... there's a caution in me for folks, and I pray for folks a lot in that vicinity, because of fire, massive fire, and massive amounts of water. Not having to do with the stream, just massive amounts of fire and water. Plus, geologically, that area is reactivating, and that there's a monster right below Italy that can easily consume everything around it. There's some issues in the Aegean Sea that require attention. And of course, Chile and Peru are now on my radar, because if they go, they're going to loosen the Coscos plate. And if you guys watched this last series of earthquakes, you saw Alaska and the earthquakes going back and forth between Alaska and the Sandwich Islands. Like somebody was playing earthquake tennis or something like that. That's a plate destabilization. What would happen in that case if that Coscos plate goes? It's going to release a lot of pressure. It could potentially release a lot of pressure near San Diego, and that whole place could be lost near that area. So, that's and it seems like the Lord is giving message after message after message, but very few are paying attention, right? They keep saying, well, I'm going to build right back in this place again. Every year they do this. I'm going to go right back to this place and build again. I'm going to build it stronger the next time, right? And this persistence, instead of actually saying, wait a minute, let me pay attention, people are going right back to the same spots. The Lord's only going to give so many messages, and then, something's going to happen. right? Just like these storms. You guys think storms are random. I do not. I don't think they're random. In fact, I found the opposite to be true. Computers are based on mathematics. How in the world can mathematics line up with the weather? That's impossible. How in the world earthquakes are supposed to be random, right? Then why are they lining up with modeling data? And I'm not talking about modeling, making a model after the earthquakes in the earth. No, but you make a mathematical set of sequences. And the earthquakes follow that sequence. Why? How can that happen? Unless something is already predetermined. It's not mankind. They would never do anything like that because they cannot. Some of the plates in the earth are so thick and so solid, some of them have never moved. And they're just now moving. The magma flows underneath the earth, right? They track those from heat differences over land masses, and they are quite expansive. We have a real issue in the earth, and it's almost like spiritually, all of you guys suspect it. Spiritually, you suspect it. You don't know what it is. You just know that something is. Something is not right somewhere, and something is about to blow. At any rate, this pulse could increase the chances of these alarms prematurely. Now, I just named quite a few areas, so you look in those areas, and you'll see them. And if you start to pick up on certain patternized, looks of these earthquakes, you're going to notice quite a bit. Quite a bit. It's like an eggshell. So if you know about frequencies and fluid dynamics, vibration, for example, if you put salt on a piece of black paper and put that piece of black paper over a subwoofer, right? Turn that subwoofer or hook that subwoofer into a signal generator, run very low frequencies, you're going to notice specific patterns in the sand. They form geometric shapes, isometric geometric shapes. And as that happens, the earth is just like that. You take that same type of interaction, you break that down into 4 quadrants because you're dealing with the earth. Then you have a computer system break that down into more quadrants. Right? So you'll end up with millions of different quadrants. Then you take all those vibrations and you'll start running formulas on those to see which part of that pattern is heaviest. And I'm telling you, the outcome pops out right there on the crust of the earth. And boom, there you are. And it's almost a constant like that with everything in creation. Then you take that down on the quantum level and you begin to see why. So it's a lot of, I know that sounds confusing to a lot of people, but that's really a deep nerd talk. But it just works out that way. You can do that with engineer things like cars and, but if the earth was made and it was random or something like that, there'd be no way in the world. It just wouldn't be the way it is right now. Let's put it that way. It wouldn't be. But get ready for some shakings. Eventually, we're going to have, I would say this, we're going to have an earthquake of a duration so long that I would be shocked if any city is left standing after a series of earthquakes hits in this earth. And we're not talking about way off in the distance either. We're talking about something that's going to happen relatively soon. Something that's not discussed because they have most people looking in specific places, right? But what if the earth began to vibrate and it just did not stop for a while? The bigger the object is, the longer the reverberation is going to be. And because the earth is, because it's somewhat self-sustained as far as its gravitational pull by the sheer mass of the center of the earth, it can shake for quite a while. And if that happened at about a 3.1 or 2.2 all over the earth, At the end of a week, no city would be standing. No city would stand. Everything would fall over. Everything would iron would begin to break. Steel would give way. Everything would happen. And that's going to be an issue because something similar to that's going to happen with this double wobble. And when I first started talking about a double wobble, people thought it was they thought it was a loon. Until they found out we have a double wobble. It sounded strange. In fact, I believe I was talking to BP Earthwatch some years ago about a double wobble. Nobody could wrap their mind around it. Not that way now. At any rate, we have some issues and problems. The earth is changing. But what's the difference this time versus any other time in history? We become highly dependent upon a very stable earth, not an unstable earth, and that's a big problem. If we were all mobile, none of what's about to happen would really bother us. We would just move to other portions of the earth and continue on with our lives. But that's not our nature. We get a home or a house, you fix it the way you like. You don't want an earthquake. You don't want a volcano to explode, right? You don't want that stuff. But it's going to happen, and it's going to begin to fight our infrastructure, right? We will have sinkholes near the size of a city. Near the size of a city, we'll have sinkholes. Can you imagine the ground of New York dropping 5 inches in one day? There'd be a lot of car accidents, wouldn't it? Yes, it would. And if that's what it takes to break this cycle of believers from holding on to what the world has, too many believers are embracing what the world's rhetoric. They're holding it close. I've noticed something too. Reading the Bible, you begin to determine that anger follows, or anger precedes and follows darkness. It does. Every single prophet, every single saint was at peace before they went. Every single saint, every single prophet was at peace with what the Lord was doing before they left. Every single one. Every single person in the world was in disarray, full of anger, and had the same message before they went. You know what their message was? Everything was wrong. But those who belonged to the Lord, they had peace. They knew the Lord was in control of all things, and they had peace. They had a different fight altogether. You know, the Lord said that he bid his guests, right? But they wouldn't come to the wedding, and so he said, hey, go give out these invitations for whoever wants to come. Because the first people he went to rejected his offer. So the Gentiles have come into the fold. That's us. His own people, the Jews, being blinded for a time, can't accept the Messiah. But we are accepting the Messiah. And then after a number of us is brought into the fold, the eyes of the Jews are going to be opened again. And when they're opened again, they will accept the Messiah. Not all of them. Those who are not tares will accept the Messiah. You see what the Lord does? He will often shut the eyes of one group to open the eyes of another, to invite the one group in before he invites his closest ones in. That same thing happens throughout history all the time. All the time. It's happening right now. Some of you, and you may never admit this, but I'm going to tell on you. You ready? You were marked to carry a message. You were reluctant. You were marked to carry the gospel. But you chose something else. And it seems like it skipped right over you. and went to somebody else. You're older now, and you sit back and you used to cross your arms in anger because you knew that the Lord had given you what you now hear. Please don't let that happen to you again. You shut your eyes because you didn't hear that call. You didn't want to come to that call, right? So he gave it to somebody else. It does not mean you lost it. It just means he's always working. Well, it's time for it's coming back to you again. The question is, what will you do? Because some of you had an understanding beyond understanding. And it seems like possibly you've lost it, but you did not. You did not. It's almost like a person thinking they lost their innocence. So long as you're washed by the blood of the Lamb, your innocence has been bestowed back upon you. But you are no longer flesh, but spirit. Do you know what that means? You remember when the apostle said, we are no longer flesh, but spirit. That's what he said. We are no longer flesh, but spirit. You know what that means? When you were born, you were driven by flesh things and flesh desires. You saw things by flesh. As you have really qualified your own relationship with Christ and it's been refined, you have become spiritual, not really caring about things of the flesh, still falling to certain things from time to time. But for the most part, your identity is spiritual. The identity that sometimes you have hidden from the world. The person you really are that you can't show anybody else. Does that make sense? It's coming all the way out. Man is losing his ability with something, and you had to be spiritual before this happened. Man is losing his ability to hide or obscure his own self. Meaning, if you watch carefully, people are losing their ability to lie. They're losing it. So that if a person is truly evil, they're losing their ability to hide that evil. If they're truly corrupt internally, they're losing that ability to hide their corruptness. What you may not know is, because we're in prophetic days, is that the world will embrace the wicked just as they do now. They will reject the righteous. Do you know why they reject the righteous? Did you examine the Gospel of John? When light came into the world, right? The darkness did not comprehend the light. Men at that time, they didn't like the light because of one thing. It shined in the darkness. It shined on their evil deeds. When you were young and a preacher came by, or somebody who was one of those real preachers, when they came by, you started hiding everything you were doing. Why? Because you knew it was not the right thing to do. But you only had the thought when a preacher came by. Don't you remember? So as soon as one of those real preachers came by, you began to hide your iniquitous things. Why? Because light will always shine in the darkness, and you try to hide that dark thing away from the light. That's what Jesus was saying. The light shined in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. Men love darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil. When your deeds are evil, born of darkness, you begin to fight against the light. You will rebel against the light. But you're no longer flesh, meaning because of the blood, you won't hide, you'll shine even more. That hidden person you had on the inside of you that everybody rejects will come out. That will be you. And the other person you've hid behind all these years to try and mingle in with the world, that person will die. But that's your story. The world will be the opposite of you. The opposite. So when a person shouts from the rooftop, they're going to shout out their own things. They won't shout out somebody else's things. Everything said in secret is going to be brought to the light. They're going to shout it out from the rooftops. That's going to be a person shouting out their own stuff. Because we're being pushed into a society that's losing its ability to obscure anything. Why do you think the wicked are now grouping together? You're going to see more and more and more groups. Bundles of people gathering together under a banner. But theirs will be the opposite of this gathering or gatherings like this. They will not join together for the sake of the Lord or for his message. They're going to join together to pick out a target. They're going to join together to express their grievances. They're going to join together to murmur and complain collectively. This always happens right before the Lord delivers the righteous and condemns the unrighteous. Every single time. Okay. Let me go back here for a few minutes, guys. Let's see. Let's see. They will group geographically too. They might. For example, the division that you guys see in the world is nothing more than a part of a separation. It's inherently in everybody to do this. Well, not in everybody. It's inherently in those who are trying to find where they belong. A dodo like myself, I already belong to a kingdom, but it's not of this earth, right? Because ironically enough, I truly understand and believe in the ways of Christ. I don't believe in the resolve of man. How many times have people had to be fooled, even by their own mind, thinking that they have the solution? They only have a fix to a temporary problem. And then the problem changes and another fix is needed. Our Father is not like that. Once he has a solution, it's eternal. And I'm getting too old to go around in circles. I'm not a hamster anymore, right? We used to be hamsters, going around in circles all day, doing the same thing every day, thinking, I've made it to the top, when in truth we were still in a cage. The Lord called us to a higher standard. Much higher standard. Those who stand in that capacity, those are the ones who exercise the authority. Those who stand in that capacity become the humble of the earth. And the humble of the earth are the most powerful. All right, you guys. Anybody have any more questions there for me? Anybody? Well, if not, I'll tell you what. There's much more to do. You guys keep your prayers going for people. People are trying to sort some things out tonight. I pray they make the right decision. But it begins with us. If you ever want to see if the world is divided, call up a few of your Christian friends. Try to get everyone to agree on the phone. It's almost impossible these days. Almost impossible. But I'll tell you something, the Lord has you. You're here to be delivered. That's why you believe in him. And he will complete the work he began in you. He most certainly will. Folks, get yourselves ready. We're going to be in for it, but don't worry. The Lord has already made a way for us to go through it. But when we go through it, remember something. It's by your Father's hand that anything happens. Look for his understanding in it. Have your life enriched. And remember, please don't pick out our target. Let's not blame anybody, but assume all responsibility. This is your time to make a difference.